Guys, welcome back to the Jenks Island podcast, the only podcast where your takes from a washed-up Division III cornerback. I'm your host, Grayson Jenkins, and today's episode will be breaking down the Saints' horrific loss to the Packers that we all just witnessed on Monday Night Football. To anyone who actually watched that whole game, I apologize. I was sitting there the whole time just muddling to myself, this is horrible. Like, this is the worst I've ever felt as a Saints fan, and Kevin Gates once said the brown bag days are over. Well, Kevin Gates might have to make a new Saints anthem because they might be back. It's just really not a good look for the Saints being the first team to be shut out to the Packers, 33-0 loss. And basically the whole offense was terrible all game long. The defense was terrible all game long. Luckily, the Packers put in their twos, so it wasn't as bad of a score as it could have been. But it was a horrific loss for the Saints all in all. And the first thing I want to touch on is just this defensive performance, right? So the defense gets on the field first. The Saints the Saints won the toss. They kick off to the Packers. The Packers offense drove down the field with ease. I mean, Josh Jacobs, I looked at his fantasy line. I was going against him. He had 5 points in the first drive and only like 15 yards rushing on the first drive. He had a few catches, 30 yards receiving, something like that. And the guy was just dominating every single time he got the ball. In the first drive alone, you saw him stiff arm Tyrann Mathieu into oblivion. The guy goes flying. He should have scored on it. He luckily for Tyrann Mathieu goes out of bounds. Then they end up throwing the ball to Montavion Wicks for a touchdown when Ugo Amadi flops. Literally, instead of just covering the guy, instead of, oh, he ran into me, I'll just cover it. He made it easy for me. Just falls down. And Montavion Wicks, with the defender on the ground, says, I'll take it. I'll go score. Here, Jordan, throw me the ball. I'm wide open. Why not? Like, it made no sense for Ugo Amadi to do that, yet he did. Anyways, the real highlight for me was just this defense. You could see it getting old. You could see the talent just depleting on this defensive side of the ball, and it needs to be fixed in this offseason. First off, Tyrann Mathieu made a bunch of questionable decisions this game. Obviously, that stiff arm, he looked like he just was kind of going into bear hug Josh Jacobs. He said, not today. Stiff arm into oblivion. The second one was not going to tackle Kraft down the sideline. Tyrann Mathieu visibly just kind of stands there, shuffles a little bit, lets Kraft just keep going. And Tyrann, in that situation, it's like you hit him, he goes out of bounds 5 yards shorter. It's just questionable decision. And then later on that drive, he let Jacobs walk in the end zone. Jacobs comes at him at the 2-yard line. He just kind of, oh, here you go. Here, score. I'll let you in. Don't mind me. I'm just here on defense. God, it pissed me off because no one seemed to be talking about it. But he literally let him walk into the end zone. Now, whether or not that's due to that stiff arm earlier on, I mean, maybe. But Tyrann Mathieu's looking old, looking to get burnt down the field. And I love Tyrann Mathieu. He's a great worker. He's a great leader of the team. It's just sometimes age catches up to you, and it's seeming to be that's what's happening here. Secondly, the second guy I want to talk about is Demario Davis. I mean, he looks like he knows what he's doing still, right? Like he knows where to be and when to be there. But it looks like he's aging, right? He's 36 now. He's getting older. That's obvious. But age is finally really hitting him. On the pass rush, he doesn't look the same. When he's covering guys, he looks a lot slower, and guys are getting open a lot easier against him. And it's just not the same Demario we're used to. And obviously, he let Brooks break a tackle in the backfield where he had him wrapped up. And it's like, that's Green Bay's second or third running back that you're just letting bounce off you. So it's not a good look for this defense. When these are your stars and they're all getting too old to play, you need to draft young talent. And that's where the Saints need to go in this draft. Talent across the board. And I'll get to that a little bit later. Third thing, our cornerbacks looked really, really bad in this one. Obviously, Lante Taylor had the one pass breakup, but Kool-Aid McKinstry looked pretty rough in coverage. He had a really bad missed tackle on Josh Jacobs early in the game. Alante just seems to get lost a lot of times in coverage. Ugo Amadi seems to get lost a lot of coverage. I know he's the inside nickel usually most of the time. It's not really a cornerback, but he should be a safety. He's not in a good spot for him. But I think those coverage, obviously ran a lot of man coverage. A lot of that improves if the defensive line gets home. Our defensive line had 0 sacks after having 8 sacks 1 week ago. And obviously you look at it, they did have pressure. Chase Young he should have had a sack. Obviously Chase Young, king of almost sacks. He had another one in this game. But when pressure starts getting there, I think that the corners and the defensive backs get a little bit more comfortable and it starts looking a little bit better. But those cornerbacks are not what you want. I think Adebo should get a payload this offseason from the Saints. They should try to get him back because what does he have to lose, right? He just had a horrific injury. He's going to be coming back next year. He gets a little bit more money from this team than other teams, I think. And so I think that he'll stay and be that cornerback one next year. And then finally, my big knock on this defensive performance was just like capitalize on the opportunities you're given, right? Colin Saunders tips the ball up in air, going to get his own pick, and Alontae Taylor side checks him, then hits the ball out of his hands. Like that had to be the most insane thing I've ever seen on the field. As a defensive back, you want your defensive line to do well. You want them to get picks. Like you're cheering on the big guys, and then that moment happens, and Alontae Taylor hits it out of his hands. It's really bad. And Alontae Taylor and Kool-Aid McKinstry, they're not interception kind of corners, right? They're not ball hawks by any shapes or forms at all. That's not their job. That's not what they do. They're more of hit the ball down, tight coverage kind of guys, and they haven't really been doing that. But that's what they're known for. Obviously, we get mad at Paulson Adebo for being a ball hawk kind of guy. It's a lot more iffy. He makes the play, or the other team makes the play, but he's getting more picks and getting the offense the ball more. So that's kind of needs to be talked about as well. Now, getting into where Kendre Miller comes in with this RB confusion, this RB room, there was a lot of talk going into this game. Kendre Miller needs to have a career game. Kendre Miller is going to lead this offense. That's the key to this game, especially with MVS out. And in this game, Kendre Miller only has 8 of the 15 carries for the Saints. I mean, obviously, yes, Jordan Mibbs gets involved, and he looks solid, but he has a few dropped passes. But then Jamal Williams getting carries in this game makes no sense at all. Mainly because Jamal Williams is most likely not going to be with this team next year. And secondly, we've seen him run. We know what he does. He provides no burst. Yeah, he might be good for a 1-yard carry, but sometimes that's tough too with him. Like we've seen what Jamal Williams is. We haven't seen what Kendre Miller is. You need to get him the ball more to be able to see that. And yes, Darren Rizzi came out and did say in the post-game conference that they kind of got Jordan Mibbs more involved because they got behind in the game. So I understand that a little bit. But Jamal Williams just shouldn't be on the field at all. Kendre Miller needs to be getting more snaps, more looks. In the fourth quarter, especially when you're throwing the ball and Mims is dropping the ball, get Kendre and see if he can catch it, see what he can do with it. Just a rough look and just confusing from the coaching perspective of this game. And then another thing I want to note, for Darren Rizzi, a special teams coordinator, why the hell is Jamal Williams returning kicks? Why? He's not fast. He doesn't provide a burst. He can't make dudes miss in the open field. And on every single kick return, he gets it. He looks like he's running in sand. He's running in sand. And I mean no disrespect to Jamal Williams as a person. He is probably one of the best people on this team. If I were to ever meet Jamal Williams, I would love it because I would just love talking with the guy because person to person, that guy's an amazing guy. But on the field, he's not your RB2. He's not a returner. That's not what he is. On the Lions, they used him what he was, a goal line back, get him in the end zone. That's what he was good for. The Saints aren't using him in that job, and it makes no sense at all. Third thing, is Spencer Rattler the future for this team? And I think this game left a lot of question marks in that regard because this is a tough game to judge Spencer Rattler based on just having no weapons. His whole offensive skill position group for this team is gone. Not a single starter is playing in this game, right? And then you lose MBS right before the game. So this team is so depleted. None of these receivers are receiver ones. None of these receivers are even like NFL roster guys for most teams. These are guys that we picked up halfway through the season. Dante Pettis, who had a solid game today, was not someone going into this game going into the season that was on a team. Kevin Austin Jr., same thing. He was a practice squad kind of guy. He's looked solid, but he's not a 53-man roster guy going into this year. So you can't judge Rattler for that. And obviously, he needs to learn to throw the ball away. That's my big talking point for Spencer Rattler right now. He gets sacked when he doesn't need to. 1, 2, 3, you either throw it away, throw a check down, or you have found your guy. But instead, it's 1, 2, 3, and then he sees the pressure and goes down. And I think that's a really big talking point for him. Obviously, Drew Brees, when you have him, he knew that a sack is a turnover, basically on a drive. A sack There's a turnover-worthy play. It kills a drive half the time, or more than half the time, because you're not getting a sack on second down, especially, or right before half in the 2-minute drill. That sack cost them because obviously you had to take a timeout and you lose 12 yards when you could have possibly taken a check down, then a timeout, and then you could kick a field goal. So things like that are really hard for this, just judging it. But obviously, he doesn't have weapons to throw to. So what are the real talking points there? And finally, he throws the ball way too hard. And I think it's just like, I don't know if that's him not knowing his strength or what, but he's throwing the ball seemingly a 99-mile-per-hour fastball, rolled as Chapman style, 103, to the guys when they're 5 yards away. And you see it. And it's like over the middle of the field, high and fast. That's not what you want. You got to throw it soft over the middle, kid. And I know he's going to learn that over time, things like that. But right now, you throw the ball softer. A few of these balls got caught and they possibly could have driven further down the field. Fourth thing I want to talk about. Is Darren Rizzi the future? No. No, he's not. Not a head coach, at least. Maybe if you can get him back as a special teams coach, which is very, very unlikely. But as a head coach, no, he's not. First, I mean, before the 2-minute warning, yes, there was confusion of whether or not the refs, because they did. The ref, when Kevin Austin Jr. fumbled out of bounds, the ref right next to him waved his hands over his head. This means the clock is stopped. And Darren Rizzi saw that. I guarantee you he saw that. And so he thought, okay, we're good. We're good to go. We got time. But then the clock started running anyways, which is the right thing in that situation. The clock should have never stopped. The ref should have never gone like this. That should never have happened. But as soon as it does happen, the clock is expected to stop. Darren Rizzi thought it stopped, things like that. But he has to know the rule of if it's fumbled out of bounds, the clock keeps rolling. Call a timeout or check with a ref, see what happened there, then call a timeout. Instead, they burn all the way the clock from 45 seconds or 40 seconds down to 15. That's unacceptable. Secondly, not giving Kendra more touches. Obviously, he said Jordan Mims wasn't more involved because they got down. Kendra deserves no touches either way. And finally, you're punting way too many times. You're a 5-win team. It was 4th and 2. You're at like the 40-yard line with a good amount of time left. And you're thinking, oh, I guess we punt the ball. Maybe we stop them. Maybe we don't. But either way, you're punting the ball. They've taken 5 to 10 minutes off the clock every single one of their drives. So you're giving away the ball and seemingly a lot of time as well. Instead of you go for it, maybe they score, but it takes a lot less time if you don't get that 4th down, obviously. So it's just tough. Rizzi obviously doesn't have a lot to work with on offense. But we said the same thing with DA. And I think Darren Rizzi, yes, he had a little bit of culture, a little bit of a pop, a little bit of a burst when he came in, but that's the interim burst, things like that. He is a more likable guy. He's a better talker to the media, things like that than Dennis Allen. But all in all, he's a special teams minded guy. And you need someone that's either focused on the offense or defense that can really get one of those sides of the ball down. Get them to where they're good. That's what you need on this team right now. And unfortunately, Rizzi's not that. But I would love if he could come back as a special teams coordinator. Whether or not he would want to do that, who knows? And finally, what's next for this team? What is next for the Saints? Obviously, they need a culture change at head coach. Adam Schefter mentioned Aaron Glenn or Mike Vrabel as being favorites for this team. And I could see both of those guys as a good fit for this team because they do bring a lot of culture, right? And they're trying to, at this point in time, you need a change immediately for this offseason. This team is reeling. And if one of those two guys can come in and just say, hey, this is who we are, like Dan Campbell did for the Lions. This is who we are. This is the expectation we have. And you get that through all 53 guys on the roster's minds, then that's what you need. You might not win right away, but you need a culture change ASAP. Just get things fixed and then figure out winning after that. Obviously, with those two guys, you're not getting the cream of the crop. Ben Johnson, that's the ideal candidate. If you can get Ben Johnson on the Saints, you're rejoicing in New Orleans. But what is there on this team to get him to come here? Nothing. There's nothing that you're like, oh, I would love to go work with that. Maybe Olave and Rashid Shaheed, but you're not in a spot to pick a top quarterback for him. You don't have salary cap. Your defense is aging quick. So it's a tough spot. If Ben Johnson came to town, it would be amazing. I think he could change things really quickly, but you just don't have a roster, salary cap, things like that he would want. So I don't see that happening at all. changes at every single coaching position and possibly GM are needed. I think Mickey Loomis, this game shows that this roster is horrible. And it shows that the building of this roster was horrible. There's no depth. There's no talent. There's no, like, there are a couple guys, Rashid Shaheed, Chris Olave, Alontae Taylor when he's at the slot, not corner, when he's at the slot. Kendre Miller at times. Alvin Kamara, who's older, but he's still really, really talented. But the draft has not been working for this team. Brian Bresee. Sorry, I missed Brian Bresee in there as well. Didn't have a great game today, but on the pass rush sides of things, he's great. And if you can give him a solid partner inside or an edge this draft, I think that changes things a lot for him. And I think he could be a lot better. So that's another guy I want to highlight as young talent as well. Other than that, the defensive coordinator, Joe Woods, not doing well. Clint Kubiak, not good. You got to replace both of them. And I think that will happen once you get your new head coach. And you need to draft talent. Best player available to cross the board the whole draft. I think that's what they got to do because you have holes at every single position. It's not like, oh, we're a receiver away from being a good offense. Oh, we're a middle linebacker away from being a good defense. No, you just need talent at every single position. So the sooner that you draft the best players available, the sooner that team gets better. I think that's what they need to do at least this year. Just draft whoever's the best player available at every single round, and this team will improve. You just need to plug holes and plug them fast because the faster you do that, the quicker this team will turn around. But just focusing on like a D line or O line trying to reach when and like say that's what we need and reach, it's not what you need. You just need to plug holes, get guys that are the best at what they do every single round. That's what you need. Because this picking a D end from a small school or might be a reach just because their size, things like that. Isaiah Foskey, Peyton Turner, Marcus Davenport before that does not work and clearly isn't working. So they need to turn it around, start drafting differently. And that falls on Mickey Loomis and a lot of the scouts, Jeff Ireland, things like that. So who knows? I just think we got to turn around ASAP. So anyways, that's going to do it for my Who Dat breakdown for this week. You guys comment down below what you think about the Saints team, the Saints future, things like that. I know it's bleak. I know I'm sitting there on the couch every day, every game, just depressed. So I want to hear what you guys think. Let me know, and I will see you guys next week. Who Dat, as always, even though it's not looking like we're beating a lot of teams. Who Dat, and I will see you guys next week. Merry Christmas.